You're listening to the Player Layer podcast, and I'm super happy to have with me Nicolas Fournier, who is just a fantastic game designer. He's currently working on a game called Megapulse, which will be out on Kickstarter if it's not already out by the time this is up. It is a racing game, but not what you would imagine when you hear racing game. It's a racing game for those who don't play racing games, and it's one which I enjoyed so much. He compares it to Mario Kart, and it is... I can completely understand why, because there's so much player interaction that I think if you're somebody who likes kind of high interaction, but also you're racing, but in a very clean kind of hand building style, I think you should see it. Just the game design was something that really, really impressed me, and I loved the game so much. So you should definitely check it out. This conversation to me was very enjoyable because just Nicolas is a fantastic designer, and you can really see that he knows what he's talking about. So yeah, I'll leave you to it. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy this episode. Do you want to give like a little pitch of the game, like what the game is about and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's if Wipeout, F-Zero, Mario Kart, and even Tron had a baby as a board game. So we were trying to do a futuristic racing game with tons of action. So you can shoot people, place bombs. There's a nitro you can charge and discharge later. There's a bunch of boosts on the track you're trying to get. And there's like upgrade cards, hand building, all that crazy stuff. So we're really trying to... do a more dynamic, action-packed style than other racing games out there. And there's also some kind of simultaneous action selection. So that's the basic premise behind it.
Yeah, I felt like I've played the game quite a bit ago, so like I'm not up to date to the way that it is right now, but it felt like a very clean game to me, and like mechanically it felt really good. How did you... How did you start the process, and is this your first attempt at game design?
So I've been doing game design like all my life, right? So that's the only thing I've been doing since I was a kid, was just designing games. And my day job right now is a game designer for a small studio here in Montreal. So we do some board games. Now we're working more on a video game project. And before that, I was a graphic designer. So I have like some experience gathered from these past experiences at project. But Megapulse is my first solo game and self-published game, right? So it's going to be my first experience doing Kickstarter alone. It's going to be awesome. And yeah, so and you were talking about like the process, right, of the game?
Yep.
So basically, I usually start because there's a huge debate in the game design community, which is, do you start with a theme or do you start with the mechanic, right? And I usually start with neither of those. I start with a moment. So what I'm trying to get is a feeling of what the climax of a game would feel like. So are the players excited, anxious? Are they taking a risk? Are they trying to make a difficult decision? Is there like some kind of heavy social things going on? The smiles, the heart pumping. And I try to associate these feelings with a small, clear idea. So for Megapulse, I'm not a racing game guy. I don't really enjoy like cars and engines and tires and all that stuff. But everyone enjoys Mario Kart, right? Even if you're not a car guy, you kind of enjoy Mario Kart because it's all about the interactivity less than about the race, right? You get all these upgrades, there's cute characters, and it's colorful, and there's a bunch of interaction of like you can just throw bananas in front of your friend, and then you're just all there laughing. So in Megapulse, the premise was the curve mechanics, the losing traction. So yeah, in these curves, as you're sliding out, you're going to be at some point grinding on a wall, and that's going to be dangerous. You're going to lose health, right?
Hmm.
And the choice here in Megapulse is that usually racing games ask you to slow down in curves to prevent damage. In Megapulse, we have the side thrust cards, which allows you to move sideways. So instead of going slower, you actually just have to move faster and faster, and at some point, just in the curve, move sideways and keep going. So that mechanic of sliding out in curves and choosing to go faster and take damage, or move sideways and keep going, was the basic inspiration. And from there, we kept adding stuff to make it feel like a racing game, like a futuristic racing game. So, like the theme was added on top, and the mechanics, the card selection, the bombs, all that stuff, the upgrades were added afterwards to make it feel like more exciting around that central sliding out mechanic in the curves.
It's really cool that you decide on focusing on the moment. I think that's a really good way, at least with like in my experience as well. I find that usually that's, and I talked with like Sean Phillips, for example, who talks about like setting instead of theme, and I think I think that's a good way to start it. When you mentioned Mario Kart, I immediately thought of something that I really had been meaning to ask you because it's a racing game, and I realized with racing games, one of the probably main issues that you need to address is like somebody like running away and being really quick, and I think Mario Kart does that really has a really good solution to that, which is like their catch-up mechanic or rubber banding is like rewarding the last player, so that because a racing game I think is most interesting when you're near each other, right? Because that's when you get to interact, and that's how did you solve that issue, or was that something that you needed to address?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the worst part of any racing game is runaway leaders. So when you see someone just like outrunning you and like lapping you entirely, and you don't have any reasonable way to think that you're going to win this game, then there's just no point anymore. So we were really trying to make it easy for players to catch up. Actually, make it easier to catch up than running away. So we have a few things to help that. First of all, the card play. So you have an ultra fire card to shoot people in front of you, and that automatically hits. So if you choose to shoot people in front of you, they take damage, right? But if you want to attack players behind you, you have to place a bomb, and then that bombs, you just have to hope that you place it well, that you hinder players enough to slow them down or to take the bomb, but it's not guaranteed. So it's harder to deal damage to people behind you than ahead of you. Then usually in racing games, they tend to avoid chaos. So they make it so that you change the turn order at the end of every round. So whoever is first in the race becomes the first player. So that way the first goes first. So he creates some distance between players, and then the one behind him goes and so on. But that means that there's not really any collisions, and it's usually done to avoid that kind of chaos. In Megapulse, the turn order is fixed until someone changes it by playing the Cybergrade card. That means that the first player can get bumped by a bunch of players who played before him on that round. So since the turn order can be changed by the players, I can play a card to say, oh, this turn I'm going to be first player. I can surprise you, crash into you, shoot you, do all that crazy stuff. So being ahead is actually a vulnerability because players can bump into you, let's say. As being last is actually some kind of a safe spot. And that is not that apparent while you play, but it's also all the game design is centered around making it easier to catch up than running away. And then we have our catch up mechanic. So if everything else fails, each plot pilot has a special ability. So whichever color I chose, let's say red, blue, or yellow, whatever, I can add to that a pilot. So I can mix and match them together. And if I choose, let's say, the Trickster, I have a grappling hook. Awesome. I can use a grappling hook, but if I'm further behind in the race, it's going to get stronger and stronger. and I won't have to pay the cost to activate it anymore. So I'm kind of incentivized to use that catch-up mechanic if I'm too far behind. And then if I catch up enough to you, if I'm like 5 spaces behind you, I don't have these bonuses anymore. So then from there, it's up to me to actually catch up. So that's the kind of the rubber band effect we're talking about. So the sweet spot is 5 spaces between everyone. So the catch up is to make sure that everyone stays in that 5 zones range. And then the other mechanics are meant so that you still have to earn your victory. You still have to make wise choices to pass the first player after catching up. But there won't ever be some kind of crazy runaway leader.
From what I remember of the game, I think you had addressed that really well, because it felt good being behind, because you got a little bit more powerful, and you were able to keep players at the optimal distance without it feeling like, without you feeling bad as the first player. I think that's like the difficult bit, is like getting it so that the first player isn't like, well, that kind of sucks because I'm not like earning this. No, you are earning it, but it's just the other player's also getting a bonus.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I see in a lot of games, like when people try to do the opposite, and they try to kind of give you something give something negative to the first player instead of like something positive to another player. It's like effectively it's the same thing, but one of them just actually feels bad. You don't want people feeling bad while they're playing the game.
And that's what we call loss aversion. Do you know loss aversion? Should I
explain it, please, especially for the listeners as well.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, loss aversion is the kind of a psychological science behind the fact that losing something, let's say I lose $10, feels worse than earning that same thing feels good. Okay, so the emotional balance is more disrupted if I lose something than if I gain that something. So effectively, the result is the same. There's a difference of $10 in my bank account, but losing that $10 is going to have more impact, right? So in a game, that's really important, because sometimes you do want players to feel the loss aversion to make, let's say, a risk more important, to make players fear some kind of consequence. But sometimes, if you want a game to feel good, if you want to remove some kind of negative feelings, you have to play with loss aversion to give things to players instead of removing things from them. So that's what we did with the death system in our game. So usually people assume that if you die in a game, either you're eliminated or you have to lose a turn to repair or something like that. And basically that's what we had at the beginning. So you lose a turn, you repair, and you do nothing else. So that allowed players that killed you to move forward and create some distance between you. All right, but it felt really bad for you, and there was no real incentive for other players to shoot you, because then if someone else kills you, then that's okay. I focus my effort on racing, and someone else does the job to kill you. So I don't gain anything personally from killing you. But when we use that system, we realized how bad it felt, and we changed things a bit. So now when you die, you actually can still play your turn. So you can still play your cards and everything, but there's just a small portion of your turn dedicated to repairing. And that's going to be on the same turn that you broke down. You don't lose anything much. The only thing that resets is your speed. So your speed goes down to 0, but that's one thing that's easy to play, to go again up and start racing. But to balance that out, because now dying is not that bad anymore, why should you kill players? We instead gave rewards to other players. So let's say I deal 3 damage to you and you die, then I get 3 frenzy tokens, which help me move forward. So each token is worth 1 movement. So there's now a real incentive to shoot player, because the more I shoot players, the more reward I get. So personally, I want to shoot players. And in the end, these tokens, combined with the death being less important, makes the same difference in the distance between players, but all the negative feelings are gone, and now there's just good feelings. So that was really important. That was like one way we implemented loss aversion. There's a great if game designers listen to us. There's a great talk on the YouTube from GDC that talks about loss aversion. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. No, the GDC talks are just great in general. A lot of them. Yeah. I think I've heard one story about like World of Warcraft, how they would give, at first they wanted to make players basically play less hours or something like that, and basically what they would do is like they'd give you less and less XP the more time you've been locked on. And I don't remember why that was, but because I read it a long time ago. But then they realized that instead of doing that, what they should do is just give them a bonus for the first couple of hours and then like cut it off. And that's like it's the exact same thing. You're getting the exact same amount of XP, but it's like it's not. Why are you punishing me for playing more?
It feels different.
It's like I'm being rewarded for just logging on.
Exactly, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah. It's it's a funny like psychological trick.
Exactly.
Speaking of, what would you say? Because you say that you've got like experience with video games versus board games. Do you think that the process, because I don't have a lot of people who are in both like sides of or like both industries. How much do you think that they overlap, and how much do you think the similarities are, and like what are the like bigger differences?
It's actually quite impressive how different they are. There's some overlap, of course, when talking about like the main mechanics. Like in board games, everything is simplified. You're limited by the components. You're limited by the complexity of the rules. So there's no computer doing all the math behind. So everything math related is very limited in board games. So you have tokens, tracks on some boards, and that's basically it. If you want to do some kind of random effect, you have to roll dice or draw some cards. And then these cards better have some dual purpose to them, because if you just draw them to do some random thing, then it's not worth it, because you pay for that cardboard, right? So every decision matters in a board game, and it compared to video games, it kind of feels like a minimalistic design, because you want players to be welcome, to have a welcoming experience, to be the rules be easily read and understood, and you want to share that social experience with other players as easily as possible. Compared to video games, where it's all about keeping the player engaged through various systems that interlock with each other. So these systems can have some kind of very easily understandable base to them, but then you can add some crazy depth to them to make more engaged players pass some time to master them. So that's one real difference, is that there's a bunch of math involved, a bunch of technical limitations in the video game as well, because everything comes to a cost, because it takes so much time to implement the mechanic. As in board game, you just add some numbers on a card on the cardboard. So each have some drawback, each have some perks, but the way you're spending your time as a game designer in a video game is going to be at the beginning really more about like designing those big systems, like how in a survival game, how you're going to be crafting things, how you're going to be gathering resources, fighting, and that kind of feels like a board game design. And then when you get in more details of the video game, you're just talking about numbers, you're just talking about all stats, perks, all that stuff, and that feels much more on the war game side of game design, of board game design. But if you're doing modern board games, then that's where your experience differ in the minimalistic way.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times people don't realize that in a board game you have to be the one, you have to be the computer, you have to be the one that's actually physically doing that upkeep. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of games like in playtesting that are like, basically you're just doing upkeep, and you've got a lot of like with something that like in video games you can do a lot is like passive income, which you can do in board games, and a lot of the times it works, but sometimes like those actions that can like routinely happen like very easily in video games, I find can be things that people potentially forget, and you have to keep that in mind. And that, like, if people aren't remembering to do it, then that also comes with a negative feeling, right? Because it's like, you know, making somebody feel kind of stupid, like, oh, I forgot to do that 3 turns ago. And like, I guess if it's a solo game, I always tell myself when I play solo games, like, yeah, it's okay, it's a solo game, I cheated a little, that's fine. But otherwise, it's like, you know, it's like the game has totally changed, and I realize now that I was supposed to, you know, do something. And actually, a lot of that, I think, comes from graphic design as well, right? Because where to set those reminders.
It's a marriage of the two.
Yeah.
Graphic design and game design are hand in hand, making the experience clear and understandable. The more automatic processes you have in a board game, the more people will forget them, or the more weight it will add to the experience in general. So usually you're trying to have everything like being a player action. So the player does something to earn that income every turn, or the player has to take that action to resolve some kind of round effect. That makes it easier for them to remember, because it's like actually them taking the action. If they forget, it's not something that you have to like try to recreate, like, oh, I forgot to take my income last turn, let's say I gain it right now. No, you just forgot to take that action, right? So a lot of that comes to design by subtraction, which is trying to remove everything that isn't part of the core experience, and everything that is kind of clumsy in the game design. And also dual purpose design. So one action or one thing or one component or one idea is a solution to many problem or mechanic that interacts with many things. So that it's really about player psychology, how players think and interact with the physical components. That's why I love board game design, personally, more than video game design, because trying to, as a designer, do some minimalistic stuff with the physical limitations you have is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's much more interesting, I find, to work with like some type of restriction, and I think that's also the case with you. I'm sure that's the case with video games. I don't have as much experience, and I actually haven't played. I don't play as much video games, though I used to play a lot as growing up, especially. But like sometimes I find when you try and like make a really, for example, one thing that I see very often is boards that are way too big because somebody wants to make an epic experience, and they're like, epic means big, right? And then you have to realize that you need to kind of populate that big thing, so it's not just moving around, because then, you know, moving around becomes kind of tedious, and then, you know, and when I think about it, at least from what I've seen in like those big open world games, sometimes you have that same problem. You have like zones that, you know, they aren't as interesting as you could make it when you just cut out a lot of that and just shove a lot of action into a little smaller thing.
It's crazy how board game design in that sense can influence video game design, because if you come from the board game medium and you try to start designing video games, you'll have those kind of limitations in your head and those concerns as you're creating the game. And when you look at games like Slay the Spire or games that are like
board game like
or even the one the very minimalistic one, Into the Breach, is that the name?
I haven't played that one, but I've played a lot of Slay the Spire.
These are kind of board game inspired in a sense, and you can feel it. You can feel how they try to make it like they implemented some restrictions on themselves while designing the game, make it as tight and concise as possible. And those games are the games I personally enjoyed the most, because the other big games can be fun if you're invested like 200 hours in them, but they're less welcoming when you sit down just to learn a new game. Video games can be intimidating if they don't exercise restraint.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Actually, with you, I know that you've got a modular board and you can set up different tracks. And could you talk about kind of how that affects the pacing of the game, or like, does it affect the pacing, and what that adds to the experience, and why you chose to have that?
Yeah, so in a bunch of racing games, you have just like one board with one track, and on the other side, there's maybe a second track if you're lucky. But what Rallyman GT did is really interesting. They had this modular board with hexagonal tiles, and you can create your own track, and you have this track booklet when you can see all kinds of different tracks there that are available for you to create, right? So we did a similar approach where we have these track tiles that you can mix and match together to create some crazy tracks. And there's actually, I think, 32 different track tiles in the box, but you only need like 12 or 14 to create a track. So you have so much of them in the box with a track booklet that helps you navigate through like about 30 or 40 different pre-made tracks. And because of that modularity to the board, you can create all crazy stuff. You can create a small track that will play in about 25 minutes. That's what we have at the Gen Con demo. That's just a small track. Or you can just try to use as many tiles as possible and do a big race. And because you can do 1, 2, or 3 laps, then you can kind of decide how long you want the game to be. So the game will still feel the same. It will still feel as concise and light, but you will like psychologically doing like 8 laps on a very small track, like in that Mario Kart double dash map, right? Or doing some like a crazy adventure of going through a huge track with different features is really awesome. On the track booklet, we actually have the time that it takes to do a lap on each track, so you can kind of predetermine how much time you want to invest in the game, and you know for a fact like how long it will take. And these tracks allow you to split the track into join it back together. We have some track that reduce the size, so it's wide, it's more narrow, and you can make it wider again. We have track tiles that allow you to make some more dangerous curves, more longer curves. So there's the modularity is really exciting, and with the stretch goals and the add-ons we have planned for the Kickstarter, a bunch more is coming as well.
Yeah, awesome. And the other thing that I mentioned was kind of pacing, and I found that from my memory of the game, one really cool thing was that you reach certain almost like checkpoints in the game where you can like upgrade more, and actually the game does have a really nice pacing because it's not just the same thing over and over. It's like you feel that build up, which I think is just amazing when you get to see that. And if I remember correctly, you basically exchange your initial cards with just better actions that you can do. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's basically it. So we have a hand building experience, we call it, when we play 2 or 3 laps in a race. That is really exciting because as you mentioned, the pacing was really important to us. So we wanted every game of Megapulse to end up in a big, crazy last turn with everyone like kind of being able to win on the same turn. But then it just comes to like whoever prepared best or played their cards better. And so what we have is at the start of the race, you have your 7 cards in hand, and everyone has the same 7 cards, except each card has one unique one, but basically the same hand. And you start racing, you start using those cards, you start trying to place bombs, shoot people, crashing to each other. And then after the first or second turn, when you're kind of, now I get it, that's the game, right? You cross a checkpoint. And with the checkpoint, you get an upgrade card. And these go into your hand. Sometimes you need to discard something else, because sometimes it's just upgraded version of cards you already have. Sometimes it's a completely new card that you have to swap for something else. And so choosing what to let go of, what to add into your hand is really interesting. And these upgrade cards are crazy. So it's not about oh, you gain +1 on this or -1 on this. It's basically new mechanics. So you have the Quanta Swap, which allows you to swap positions with someone else. You have the Data Hack card, which allows you to kind of control someone during their turn. You have all kinds of stuff that they're all so different. And then, so from that, you can choose your play style. So do you want to play more aggressive? Do you want to play more defensive? You don't want to, like, are you a combo player? Do you want to do some kind of crazy chain combo? And in that sense, as you move forward the track, you kind of experiment with your build, and you can kind of see what works, what doesn't. And when you pass the next checkpoint, you can change something else. And by the end, you have this hand that you build during the track. And the last turn is where you're going to spend everything. So we have single-use cards that are way more powerful, but are single-use, right? You have your nitro gauge, which will charge up over time, and at some point you can consume it to move a lot of spaces. So people will use these cards, discharge their nitro, move all their speed, use their rival tokens, their frenzy tokens that they gain from killing each other. So that last turn, usually like people do like 20, 30 spaces on one turn, and it just blows up. So that pacing of slowly building up, the feeling just changing over and over because you keep upgrading your hand, and then that last turn that just goes into big boom, is really the pacing we are looking for here.
Yeah, and I definitely felt that that built up really, really well. I think you've done an awesome job with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. What are your you're saying like this is your first like Kickstarter that you're doing?
Yeah.
What is that process like? How do you deal with marketing? How do you deal with manufacturers? Like everything that's behind, the stuff that's not game design. That's just to get the game out.
Yeah. So it's almost like a complete second day job that we could spend in that preparation process, because it's way longer than what you initially think, right? I was thinking of having that game on Kickstarter like a year after I first presented it to people, but we were like 2 years and a half past that. and we were finally getting ready. And to be fair, I could have like 6 more months to prepare, and I would be more prepared. But at some point, like you have to put it out there. Yeah. So manufacturing wise, it's just you have to quote the game well. So you have to make sure that you have all your component lists ready, all your add-on lists ready, materials, sizes, everything, so that you can get an accurate price, and that will help you see like how much you need on Kickstarter and what will the pledge level be. Then the distribution process is really a pain. It's really complex. So we'll be partnering up with Quartermaster Logistics. They make your life really easier. You ship the games to them, and they make sure that they process every kind of tax, kind of permit needed to deliver in different countries. They'll make sure that everyone receives their game, and you don't have to deal with that yourself. And then there's also the kit, the pledge manager, right? So that people can like add all that stuff in their personal information. And then when everything will be ready, you also need a distribution partner if you want the game to hit retail. So it's all about like partnering up with different partners, basically companies that will help you through all the process, from manufacturing through distribution through fulfillment of the backers. So it's a lot of emails on that side, just sending out emails, talking with people. We met a bunch of cool people at Gen Con as well that offered their service. That's really good. And on the marketing side, it really depends if you have money or if you don't. So you could invest like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 even dollars just in marketing. And a lot of people are investing their life saving on this. Just look at Eric Geller with Custom Cannons. They were doing really great on Kickstarter right now. They raised a bunch of money over their funding goal, but they invested so much of their own money to get to that point, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do here is kind of an in-between. So we're paying for big stuff like going to Gen Con, going to SN, paying for some preview and review videos that are coming up really soon. People are starting to film and shoot photos and all that stuff. And then we do some paid advertisement on Facebook. But all the rest is just organic marketing. So we're trying to let people know that the game exists. We go on Reddit, we go on different Facebook groups, we talk about the game, we answer questions, and it's hard to do and not look as like someone spamming those groups, because like at some point you need to let people know about the game. But any kind of intrusion, any kind of things that feels like you're just wanting to make money off people, will feel disingenuine. And you don't want that. So it's hard to let people know that we just actually like want to know if you're interested. If not, it's okay because we have to tell people about it. Otherwise, like no one will know about the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So for that, I have Devin who helped me immensely. Devin is a designer I met on the Board Game Design Lab Facebook group. I played his game, Punch Kick Block. It's awesome. And I helped him a bunch with that. So now he helps me a bunch with Megapulse. And he actually accepted to join me at Gen Con. So we were both there. It was the first time I met him. And we're kicking ass there, just presented the game to I think 1,500 people during the weekend. It was awesome. And Devin just helped me so much, telling people about the game, posting some marketing content, because preparing the game and marketing at the same time, if you have a day job, is a lot of work. So thank God I have him.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think it's really good that you brought up all of that, because like I've had a lot of people kind of ask me about how they should kind of hide their game from people and be like, what if somebody tries to take the game, and it's and it's like I think you really need to be thinking about the opposite of, even if you've got a really good game, it's still hard to kind of show it because of so many people who are making games. Or currently, there are a lot of, it's a growing industry, though there's also more clients. But yeah, with marketing, you really do, and you really do need to show people that it's a genuine like product, and you're looking for like proper feedback. Like you want to know who the game is for and stuff like that, and that's really important. That's like something that just today I was talking to my co-designer about. Kind of getting negative feedback after a playtest. It's like you'd be doing a disservice to somebody if you give them positive feedback and like and exactly. it's and actually like don't address those things which you felt like those points where you didn't feel the game was doing well. And I think it's kind of just I think in general just kind of honesty is a good approach to getting things. Getting things out there.
It totally is, yeah. Getting that negative feedback is really important because you want that game to be as awesome as possible, and especially with board games. In a video game, like if there's a bug, you kind of laugh about it and you keep going. In a board game, it gets really annoying if there's kind of a bug you can exploit, like some kind of better option for you, or a rule that doesn't make sense, or something that feels kind of fiddly when you try to use it. So getting that negative feedback, constructive feedback, is really important to improve. We thought we had a solid game after a year of development, and looking back at what we had at that time, it's complete garbage. There's so much you can improve on a game until the point where it gets perfect in the sense that perfect for what you envisioned, right? Not perfect for everyone, of course. And then finding that market, that audience for your game is hard as well, because sometimes it's easy. Like if you create like a cute animal game, and obviously anyone interested in cute animals will maybe be interested. If you create a racing game, then you limit your audience a bunch because not a lot of people like racing games. But then you create a racing games with take that, like hitting people and stuff. So you lose even more people.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, we're struggling to find like, who is this game for? And the truth is, this game is for me. This game is for people like me who enjoys different kind of Mario Kart, Wipeout kind of game, and don't actually enjoy racing that much in itself. So it's more of a interactive experience for them. But finding the right communities took a long time. And at some point, something clicked. We're like, oh, Mario Kart, Wipeout, F-Zero, Tron, those kind of guys will like Megapulse. Because for a long time, that didn't click, as funny as it may seem. We were trying to advertise in people that like pure racing, like motor car racing, NASCAR and all that stuff. We were trying to advertise in people like sci-fi stuff. But then the motor car fans did not like the futuristic theme, and the sci-fi fans did not like the racing theme. So it's basically a racing game for people who don't like racing game, and a take that game for people who don't like take that. And yeah, now I think we kind of know who our audience is, because the people in the conventions and online who has the biggest smiles when they see our games are the ones that say, "Hey, is this Wipeout inspired?" And we say yes, and you could just see their childhood memories coming back. So now we found it.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned that is like really, really good, or that's like really important, is like every single descriptive word that you add to there is actually cutting people out. You know, like because a lot of the time you think like more is better, and like. And you're like, okay, this is a worker placement with take that, with with hand management, and you put those like 5 or 6 things, but like actually the more things, the more you can clean that up and have it like, what are the 2 main things, like right now, for example, like Lost Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium, they're both worker placement meets deck building, and that's more memorable than if you had put another 2 or 3 things on there to,
Definitely,
yeah. So that's really cool that you've narrowed it down, and you're finding a target audience for it, and I think there definitely should be, because I think the game just does an amazing job at what it is, and I don't think that. There is another Mario Kart in cardboard form, and
I don't think so.
Yeah, and also one that like works so well and that you've put so much time into. I heard you said you thought 1 year after presenting it to people, you're gonna do the Kickstarter, but that's still. You've put so much work into it, and it really, really shows. And I hope that it does well. What was Actually, what was your playtesting process like, and how did you decide on the things to cut, and when did you like how did you grow the game and cut and like add stuff in, and what did you look for when playtesting?
So basically, I created a game like almost 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was just another prototype for me. So as you create more games as a game designer, you kind of realize that every first iteration of something is kind of crap. And you're just trying to find the fun somewhere. You try to find like what's exciting, what's cool to play around. Because there's so many ideas one can have that pursuing them to their full extent, you'll end up like after 10 years experience and only had done 2 games, which can be good if they're good games, right? But the more the better when you start. You need to explore a bit. So for me, it was just another crap prototype. I shelved it for almost a year. But during that time, everyone I played the prototype with kept talking to me about it. It was like, oh, where's Megapulse coming along? Do you have any plans for it? It was really exciting. I want to play again. So it was the first time that people actually remembered one of the many prototypes I've had them played, right? There was a bunch of games they liked, a bunch of games they didn't like, but this one, for some reason, stuck in their mind. So I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. I was working hard on another project, and I was looking for maybe going Kickstarter with the other project, but I gave that up. I went straight on to Megapulse, and I started working on I had a co-designer at that time who helped me during that part, trying to revamp the game into a more concrete project. So we spent a few weeks doing that. We had 2 or 3 different versions that didn't work. We're trying to find how to manage it. So believe it or not, it was not always like a card play, like a simultaneous action selection with these cards. At the beginning, we had like player boards, and there were like different actions listed, and you could like place cubes to select them. And there was this kind of I don't know the name in English, but there's things that hide your player board, like these folding boards.
Yep. I know it's screen.
Oh yeah, screens. Yeah, exactly. So there were screens to hide your stuff, and that felt weird. That didn't work at all. So we switched to the cards, And from that, we implemented mechanic after mechanic. At some point, we presented it in a local convention here. It was a very small convention. We presented to a bunch of people. And the feedback was really good, really interesting. And that gave us the courage to keep working on it because people were getting hyped up. And then we just added at the point where it was too much. And that was our exploration phase, which I think is crucial to explore the different mechanics, explore your ideas. But you have to know that like almost 80% of all that stuff will be removed at the end. So anything that was not actively like being picked by players, any mechanics that were being raised so many questions on, or the things that were visibly not exciting players, we removed them. So, like we had missiles at some point in Megapulse. You can place the missiles and they move a bunch of spaces each turn because they chase each other players and they blow up like a bomb. And that was too much. We removed. There was some kind of jump and flight mechanic. We removed that. So a bunch of stuff were removed just purely based on what was exciting for players, because we wanted the game to feel as cinematic as possible. So we wanted players to feel like they are racing, to like visualize themselves, like when they crash into someone, what happens when you place a bomb and it blows up. Like you want to see like in your head that big explosion. So we kept those things that felt like they belonged in the game and then polished them from there. So it was all about making things feel good. So it was also at that point that we removed the death penalty and gave rewards to players instead, as we talked earlier. Mm-hmm. It was at that point that we made every card feel better. Because right now, if you play a side thrust, you move 2 spaces sideways and 1 forward. If you place a bomb, you place it and move 1 forward. If you shoot someone, you shoot and move 1 forward. Because it was all just shoot people or do something that makes you move.
Yeah, not allowing the game to stall, like not stopping the action of moving forward.
Exactly. So now that every card makes you at least move a space or more, helps you feel like you're always racing. And as of before, it was choosing between like doing cool stuff, like having fun, or trying to win. So we tried to mash them together and make everything as juicy, as exciting as possible. And in the playtest process, we had at this point we have over 200 playtests of the game at an average of 3 players. So that's about like 600 people who like tried the game themselves. So there was a bunch of times where we scrapped everything and restarted from scratch, trying to like keep the best pieces. And we ask a lot of questions. We ask for constructive feedback, things that people don't like, rules that are confusing, things that could be better, things that people were hoping to find in the game and didn't find. Because if you have a Wipeout fan and you tell them that's a Wipeout-inspired game and they don't have boost pads on the track, they're going to be disappointed. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to find like what's the fantasy of players, what are they trying to get out of this like juicy experience, and we add that in the game. So it was a long process, very long process, and we had the privilege of taking the time because I have a day job. That's a side project for me. That's a personal project. If you're working for a studio or a publisher, all that stuff, time is money. Mm-hmm. So you have to like rush a few things. So obviously there's always a few different stuff that could have been better, but but we worked the extra mile to make it as good as possible.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I think I told you before we started that I really like those questions that you asked, and it seems like they're just really, really good, just really good questions, and to be able to get that feedback out of people, I think is super important. Especially what you said now, setting the expectations for the game. I think that is super important because a lot of the times I find people. They try to hype their game, right? Which I think is good, and you should definitely be trying to do so. But sometimes because you set the bar so high for yourself with explaining, or like if it doesn't feel like it's going over what you talked about, then it feels disappointing, and it's kind of like that loss aversion, almost where I've had that with games like for example, the first time I played Lost Ruins of Arnak, I can't say I really enjoyed it too much just because my expectation was set so high because everyone was talking
Yeah,
so much
everyone,
positive.
same thing here. I tried and was like, okay, that's a good game, but
Yeah,
like everyone talks about it. So sometimes like you would have enjoyed the same game more if you were promised less.
exactly,
Uh,
exactly. And if you're the other thing, which is like that's just overhyping. But then on the other hand, it's what are you promising with the words that you use to describe the game? And like you
Mhm.
said, like if you're setting expectations for, this is Mario Kart, and then you present like I don't know some like Formula One without any like take that or bonus abilities and stuff like that, and it's just not. I don't think that's going to appeal to people because they have that expectation of, it needs to not only hit that promise which you've made, but like I think it needs to go a little bit above it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to like deliver their wildest dreams if you can, and we had the chance to do that because we have like a heavily modular game, so we can add track tiles, we can add some upgrade cards, you can add all the crazy stuff that people want. Um, and then because it's everything they wish for in such a game, and we made sure of that because we asked every single playtester what were you wishing for in that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
That then when we sell the game, we sell the mechanics, we sell the feel, we sell like the general idea, so they're sold on the fantasy, but they're not told exactly what it's going to be. And then when they actually play, they realize that it's exactly what they want. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit, I can do that. That's crazy. And you're like, yeah, hell yeah, you can do that. So yeah, and that's all about like giving players what they want. But then again, like we had the chance to do that in a Euro game, for example. It's harder to actually deliver on that on a fantasy premise in a cyberpunk setting. Yeah.
Yeah. So could you tell me about, first of all, what Gen Con was like for you as a first time presenter? What should people expect if they get a booth and want to show their game, or should they invest in something like that if they're not completely sure about their game yet?
Um, Definitely go to smaller conventions if you're not ready yet. I did because I was working in conventions since I'm like 12 years old. Like I've been like explaining games and hosting for different editors. I was the small kid that people found cute and got explained their games. And then with Megapulse and other games before, I did a bunch of conventions, smaller ones here in Quebec. And in those conventions, people are less busy and stressed because you actually have the time to talk with them. So you can do longer play sessions, you can request feedback, and those are really important because it's people who don't know anything about you. So sometimes they'll try to please you because they don't know you, but sometimes they won't be scared to actually give you direct feedback, and that was really helpful for us doing that. If you go on Gen Con as a first prototype or something, there's two downfalls. First is that people are really are stressed. They are on a tight schedule because they want to see everything, they want to play everything, and also it costs a lot of money. So I can pay like between $40 to $200 for a convention, a small local convention, but it costs like several $1,000s to go to Gen Con as an exhibitor, even for a small booth with just one table. And then you have to pay for the banners, you have to pay for everything, the game itself, the prototype, and the space, the
actually,
hotel.
that one table. Even I remember when we went to Essen Spiel for the first time, we didn't realize that we don't have tables and chairs, and we had to go and purchase tables and chairs because like renting them out is so much more expensive.
Yeah, Gen Con was cool enough that they give you one table and two chairs,
Okay.
but Essen does not do that. So you have to pay
They,
like
they've got free parking
€120.
They did have free parking there.
So yeah, Essen is even more expensive, both the booth and like having actual tables and chairs there. That if you're not planning on doing Kickstarter or even like going soon into like retail, it's not really that worth your money. Go to smaller conventions, but if you're looking to meet people in the business, there's a bunch of publishers there. There's a bunch of people looking for new things to add to the catalog. So if you're just an author, maybe don't buy a booth, but definitely go there and try to, like, talk about people, hit them up, and who knows, if they're interested in your game, maybe you can have a chat. And that
Yeah,
can
for
be really
sure. Actually, there's something we this year we're actually going to be in Essen. We're going to be at the authors workshop, which is basically where you just show prototypes and mainly to
Yeah,
publishers. And I think
that's
like,
very useful.
and it's very useful, and it's like half the price. So like, and people, I'm not sure like a lot of people know the option because, or that there is an option like that. Like find something, or even I had one person on the podcast who said he went to Gen Con with his card game, and he would sit in Starbucks and show it to like people coming out. If your game
Nice.
needs playtesting, you don't need to overpay for like a place that's made for selling your game and for actually like earning that money back. Hopefully, if you're just looking for feedback, you can probably there's many ways that you can get it, and
Yeah.
you can meet people, and I think it's definitely worth it just to even just learn what the insides of the industry look like, even just that, like seeing how hectic it can be, like you said.
Yeah, prototypes are really cool because you don't have to pay that much, and people expect to see prototypes there. So like, you don't have to drag people into your booth and let's say, oh, do you want to play a prototype? And they're like, I'm kind of here for real games, But then the prototype area is just people wanting to try new stuff. But you don't really have to go to conventions to playtest. Nowadays, you can just, there's many online groups that you can just hit people up, and people in your region, local area can come to you, or you can come to them and playtest. You can actually have TTS as well, Tabletop Simulator. It's really, really useful to do a bunch of playtests. The only thing really great about convention playtests is that you don't have the time to modify the game between each one. So you playtest the game like 12 or 14 times in the weekend, and after that, you get to the time to think about what you want to change. And because you saw a bunch of different opinions, you have a way more clear vision of what people want. Sometimes when people do playtests outside of conventions, they have like 1 week or 2 weeks between each playtest. And after one playtest, you immediately want to change stuff.
Yep.
And if you change stuff after each playtest, you don't get the full picture, because you only maybe players that had a bad experience, maybe that was not your target audience, maybe like something bugged and they like altered their feedback. So it can change your game for the worst if you don't take the time to gather more feedback before changing stuff.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And that's something that, like right now, we've got a game that's exactly in those stages of having a lot of changes between. Well, actually, for the past month or so, we haven't been making that many changes, but just playtesting it more. But there's definitely always that phase where there's going to be a lot of big changes because you still haven't probably found what exactly it is, or like you're still looking for how to improve like major things, and you're okay with changing big systems and making them work better. And like sometimes like our strategy right now with one of our prototypes is there's 2 local conventions that we're going to before Essen this week and next week, and make those changes in between those, and then in Essen we know it'll be whatever we get to figure out from these 2. Like if we need any major changes there. But yeah, no, I think that's such a good point of actually testing that same prototype and how that could actually you'll learn more about the game in its present state, and that'll probably help you out
Definitely, yeah.
later on. What are like I've got two final questions. What are, first of all, your plans for the future? Like what would you like to do with board games and with games in general, and like any other games that you're planning, and yeah.
So basically, I'll be busy for a while with Megapulse, because after the Kickstarter comes the big work of preparing all the files, dealing with manufacturing, fulfillment, all that stuff. So for a while, I'll be focusing on that. After that, my partner Devin has that Punch Kick Block game I was talking about, which is a really fun, casual, light card game about mascot doing boxing matches. It's really fun. It's really simple, and we both really want to work together, me and Devin, in the future. So he's helping me on Megapulse, and then I'll help him on Punch Kick Block. So we'll be trying to kickstart that. And after that, we kind of want to see what's next for us. So maybe we move in close to each other. Maybe we do some kind of online business thing where we work on our next project, our next board game, and that's going to be something that we'll like work together and make sure it's something we both want. Because co-designing for me is really more exciting and easy than solo designing, because you have something to bounce your ideas off. You have something to someone to tell you no when you're doing to
you, and keep it interesting also, because otherwise you can get into like loops of just
you go into a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
You start to design an idea and you try to test it and again, and because you took the time to writing it on a card and cut the cards and having them in your hand makes you think it's now part of the game, but actually you're just testing something. It's okay to let it go, and having someone to let you know when you're going to rabbit hole, when it would be great to explore other options, or if just a mechanic has some kind of bug with something else, it just doesn't work together. It's really cool to have someone to as just kind of a first test. If the idea passed through that person, it's better than if it didn't, right?
Yeah.
So I love to co-design, so I'll be doing some co-design with Devin after that. And at my day job, I'm now kind of lead designer of the new game we're working on. We are on the really, really early stages. We just started a few months ago. So I might be like doing that for a year or two. So after that big project, it will maybe be at the same time that me and Devin start thinking about like more seriously doing some board games together. So maybe the stars will align and something great will happen. In the meantime, definitely we'll be delivering Megapulse to people. And I have so many great ideas for Megapulse, so many add-ons that need to be unlocked as stretch goals, that if we don't unlock everything, or if the fulfillment goes well and I'm ready for something else, might have some kind of expansion or season 2 or something of Megapulse and Kickstarter after that.
All right, that's awesome. And my final question, which I ask all guests, is what would be your advice to somebody who's just starting out in game design?
I would say fail a lot.
And fast.
Play a lot of games, because the more games you play, the more you'll know like the basic mechanics, the basic ideas that players have. A bunch of games are similar when you start playing a lot of them, and that's gonna be just a toolbox for you. A bunch of solutions, a bunch of ways to deal with randomness, a bunch of ways to deal with movement, a bunch of ways to deal with combat, resource gathering, upgrading. And once you know all these mechanics, you will begin to see some kind of things you don't like and mistakes in those games, and try to be critical and see why you don't like them and how you can fix them. Playtest other people's game, playtest a lot, because playing a published game is good for your toolbox, but playing an unpublished game of another small designer will help you see the game through a critical eye, something that's it's sometimes hard to do for your own games. So when you play this other people's game and you're like, oh, that's kind of not that great, but there's some kind of great idea behind that, try to give great feedback and try to listen to yourself, listen to what you're feeling as you play, and be open and critical for your own games. Change stuff that doesn't work. Don't be afraid of trying to revamp your game from scratch stuff, because something that worked before, but going to a rabbit hole, as we talked about, is not good for you. So do a bunch of games. Don't work on the same game. Always work on 2 different games at the same time. If you're bored on one, go on the other. And that's basically it. Yeah. Do the design. The more you'll design, the more you'll play, the more you'll be critical about other and your own games, the better you'll become.
Yeah, I think that's just fantastic advice, and it sounds like right to me. So that seems to be seems to be the way. So thank you so much for talking to me. Is there any links or anything that you want to? I'll have them
sure,
in the description, anyways. But
depending on when this podcast launches, we have currently the Kickstarter preview page, so you can subscribe to that. But if you want to subscribe to our website, we can have the link in the description of the podcast. But if you want to subscribe to the website, we offer like a free expansion for people who subscribe before the Kickstarter. It's a free pilot and a few upgrade cards. And obviously, if you're excited about the game, join us on Facebook. The Facebook group of Megapulse. We are very active there. We share all our progress, behind the scenes pic of the prototype, of the conventions. We talk with people. So come and say hi. That would be awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you for having me.